What's the weirdest past you thought would never catch you? When I was a kid, video games were my whole world, and they weren't just fun, but a way of life. So late-night sessions with my friends turned into early mornings, and we would trash-talk strangers, scream at each other in voice chat, and throw around the wildest threats without thinking twice because it felt normal and safe, and everyone said stupid stuff online, but nobody really meant it. And half the time, someone would threaten to find you in real life because you quick-scoped them in Call of Duty. And we would just laugh so hard until we cried because none of it felt serious, but was just part of the game. One night, we even heard one of our friends get fired live during a match. His boss called, furious that he missed a morning meeting, and fired him over the phone while we were raiding a base. But instead of panicking, he just sighed, kept playing, and asked if anyone had extra health packs. And we couldn't stop laughing because real life and gaming life just felt like two different universes, and when they crashed together it was usually funny. I thought about those nights a lot after I started getting older, but gaming started to become less important because work and real responsibilities took over, and I didn't have 6 hours for long games anymore. And sometimes I missed it, but most of the time, I figured I had left that part of my life behind for good. And around the same time, my mom started dating again. She had been single for years, and honestly, I was happy for her, and it felt weird seeing her with someone new, but she deserved to be happy too. After a few months, she told me she had met someone serious, and said he made her laugh again, and felt different from all the other guys she had dated. And I didn't think much about it until she invited me over for dinner to meet him. I showed up with a bottle of cheap wine and low expectation, but the guy, let's call him Dave, actually seemed pretty normal at first. He made dumb jokes about traffic, asked about my work, complimented my mom's cooking in a way that felt natural, not fake, and nothing seemed wrong. We had dinner and laughed about random stuff, and it all felt weirdly easy. But after dinner, things changed. My mom went into the kitchen to grab dessert, and it was just me and Dave sitting at the table with the noise from the TV humming quietly in the background. And that's when he leaned in a little closer and smiled, but his eyes looked cold, and he asked if I recognized him, and I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was making a joke. But he stayed serious and mentioned an old username I hadn't used in almost a decade, a stupid name I had used back when I spent my nights talking trash on survival servers, and said he remembered me and what I did, and then it all came flooding back. When I was about 15, there was a guy who lost it after I killed him in Rust with a knife during a loot run, and he screamed into his mic, threatened me, and swore he would find me somehow and make my life hell and take away everything I loved. And we had laughed about it for days afterward, joking about how crazy people got over games. But he wasn't joking. Dave wasn't a random guy my mom met at a bookstore or a coffee, but someone who found her and planned it all. I felt frozen and forced myself to get through dessert without saying anything, and pretended everything was fine, because what was I supposed to say? Hey mom, your boyfriend is a psychopath from my gaming past, who's getting back at me for something I barely even remembered. My hands were shaking as I reached for my water glass, trying to process what Dave had just said. The sound of my mom's voice drifted from the kitchen, as she hummed some old song while washing dishes, completely oblivious to what was happening at her dining room table. Dave's smile never wavered, but there was something predatory about it now, like a cat that had finally cornered a mouse after years of hunting. You killed me 17 times that night, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. 17 times, I counted, and every single time, you and your little friends laughed about it, called me names I won't repeat in your mother's house. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt like sandpaper. The memory was coming back in fragments now. There had been this one player who kept coming back to the same area in Rust, over and over, trying to rebuild his base, and we kept raiding it, taking everything, killing him whenever he showed up. It wasn't personal back then, it was just the game. But looking at Dave now, seeing the cold calculation in his eyes, I realized it had been very personal to him. I mean that was just the game, I managed to say, my voice cracking slightly. We were kids, everyone did stuff like that. Dave leaned back in his chair, his expression never changing. Oh I know, just a game. That's what you said when I begged you to stop. When I told you I was having the worst week of my life and just wanted to play something to forget about it. You remember what you said to me then? I did. I honestly didn't remember a single specific thing I'd said to him, but the way he was looking at me, like he'd memorized every word, made my stomach turn. You told me to uninstall the game, and go cry to my mommy, he continued. And then you said, he paused, tilting his head slightly. Well, I won't repeat the rest, but you ended it by saying you'd find me in real life and finish what you started in the game. Ring any bells? My mom's voice called from the kitchen. You boys want coffee with dessert. That sounds wonderful, honey, Dave called back, his voice instantly warm and loving. The shift was so sudden and complete, that I felt like I was watching a completely different person. Your mom makes the best coffee, he said to me, that cold smile returning the moment she couldn't see his face. I was starting to panic. My brain was racing, trying to figure out what to do. Do I call him out right here, right now? Do I wait until my mom leaves the room again? Do I make an excuse and leave? But what then? He'd still be dating my mom. He'd still be in her life, in our lives. How long have you been planning this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Planning what? Dave asked innocently. Dating your mother. Well, I met her about 8 months ago, at that little coffee shop on 5th Street. She goes there every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m., orders the same drink every time, medium vanilla latte, with oat milk and an extra shot of espresso. She always sits at the corner table by the window, and she reads romance novels while she drinks her coffee. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to talk to her. The way he said it, with such specific detail, made my blood run cold. He hadn't just met my mom randomly. He'd been watching her, studying her routine, learning her habits. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a carefully orchestrated plan. She's really something special, he continued. Smart, funny, kind. She deserves someone who appreciates her, someone who won't hurt her. The threat was clear, even though he'd said it with that same warm tone he'd used when talking to my mom. If I told her the truth, if I tried to break them up, he'd hurt her. Maybe not physically, but he'd find a way to make her suffer for my teenage stupidity. My mom walked back into the dining room, carrying a tray with 3 cups of coffee and a homemade apple pie. She was beaming, clearly thrilled that her son and boyfriend were getting along so well. She set the tray down and kissed Dave on the cheek before taking her seat. "You two have been awfully quiet," she said, cutting into the pie. "What were you talking about?" "Just getting to know each other," Dave said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Your son is very interesting. We have more in common than I expected." I watched my mom's face light up. She'd been alone for so long after my dad left when I was 12. She'd thrown herself into work and raising me, never really dating seriously until recently. Seeing her this happy, this genuinely excited about someone, made what Dave was doing even more cruel. "I'm so glad you two are hitting it off," she said, serving us each a slice of pie. "I was worried you might think I was moving too fast, but Dave is, well, he's special." "Oh, he's definitely special," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dave's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw a flash of amusement at my choice of words. We ate dessert in relative silence, with my mom making small talk about work and the weather. Dave played the perfect boyfriend, asking about her day, complimenting the pie, making her laugh with gentle jokes. Watching him manipulate her so effortlessly made me sick. But what made it worse was seeing how genuine her feelings for him were. She wasn't just dating him because she was lonely. She was falling in love with him. After dessert, I made an excuse about having to work early the next morning, and prepared to leave. My mom walked me to the door while Dave stayed at the table, finishing his coffee. "So, what do you think?" she asked quietly, her eyes bright with anticipation. I looked back toward the dining room, where I could see Dave watching us. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute and smiled that cold smile again. "He seems really into you," I said, which was true, just not in the way she thought. "I think he might be the one," she whispered, grabbing my arm excitedly. "I know it sounds crazy, but I haven't felt this way about anyone since your father. Maybe not even then." My heart broke a little at that. My dad had been a decent guy, but he'd never been particularly romantic or affectionate. He'd left when work got transferred to another state, and instead of asking us to come with him or doing long distance, he just left, started a new life, new family, barely stayed in touch. If Dave was making my mom feel loved in a way she'd never experienced before, how could I take that away from her? "Just be careful, okay?" I said, hugging her goodbye. "Take things slow." "Oh, honey, I'm 52 years old. I think I can handle a relationship," she laughed, but she hugged me back tightly. "I love you for worrying about me, but I'm happy. Really, truly happy." I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Dave following me, but the road behind me stayed empty. When I got to my apartment, I immediately went to my computer and started searching. I found my old gaming accounts, digging through years of chat logs and friend lists. The memories came flooding back as I scrolled through usernames I hadn't seen in years. There were so many people I'd played with, so many meaningless arguments and trash talk sessions. How was I supposed to remember one specific person out of thousands? But then I found it. A conversation from almost 10 years ago, and reading it made me want to throw up. Dave had been right about what I'd said. It was worse than I'd remembered. I'd been cruel in the way only a teenager with no real understanding of consequences could be. I'd attacked him personally, made assumptions about his life, said things designed to hurt him as much as possible. And according to the chat logs, he tried to tell me he was going through a rough time. His parents were getting divorced, he'd said. He was dealing with depression and anxiety. Gaming was his escape, his way of coping, and I'd taken that away from him, turned his safe space into another place where he felt attacked and worthless. I felt sick reading my own words. I'd been a stupid kid, but that didn't excuse it. I genuinely hurt someone. And now, years later, that person had found a way to hurt me back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you enjoyed dinner. See you soon." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. How had he gotten my number? But then I realized he'd probably gotten it from my mom. She would have given it to him without thinking twice, happy that her boyfriend wanted to stay in touch with her son. I tried to think rationally about what to do. I could call the police, but what would I tell them? That my mom's boyfriend had recognized me from a video game, that he'd made vague threats. They'd think I was crazy. I could try to convince my mom that Dave was dangerous, but I had no proof. Just a feeling and a decade-old gaming incident that made me look like the bad guy. I spent the next few days in a constant state of anxiety. I kept expecting Dave to show up at my apartment or my work, but nothing happened. My mom texted me photos of her and Dave at dinner, at the movies, at the park. They looked happy together. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. A week later, my mom called me, crying. "He broke up with me," she sobbed into the phone. "He said he wasn't ready for something serious, that he needed space to figure things out." My first instinct was relief. Dave was out of our lives. But hearing my mom's heartbreak made me feel terrible. She genuinely cared about him, and now she was devastated. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said, grabbing my keys to drive over to her place. "I'll be right there." I found her on her couch, surrounded by tissues, still in her pajamas even though it was the middle of the afternoon. She looked smaller somehow, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. "I thought he was different," she said, leaning against me as I sat down beside her. "I thought he really cared about me." "He did care about you," I said, and I meant it. Whatever Dave's motivations had been for dating her, I'd seen the way he looked at her when he thought I wasn't watching. There had been genuine affection there, maybe even love. Sometimes people just get scared when things get too real. She cried for a while and I held her, feeling like the worst person in the world. This was my fault. My teenage cruelty had led to this. Dave had hurt my mom to get back at me, and there was nothing I could do about it. That night, I got another text from Dave's number. "Phase 1 complete. Hope you're ready for Phase 2. I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Breaking up with my mom hadn't been the end of his revenge. It had just been the beginning. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. My credit card was declined at the grocery store, even though I knew I had money in my account. When I called the bank, they said someone had reported suspicious activity and frozen my account. It took 3 days to get it sorted out. Then my boss called me into his office. Someone had sent him screenshots of social media posts that appeared to be from my accounts. Posts containing racist and sexist content that I'd never written. The posts had been deleted by the time I could check, but the damage was done. I was written up and put on probation. My apartment complex received a noise complaint about loud music and parties happening late at night in my unit. I lived alone and was usually asleep by 10 p.m., but somehow there was a recording of what sounded like a party coming from my apartment. My landlord threatened eviction if it happened again. Dave was systematically destroying my life, and he was doing it in ways that were almost impossible to prove. Every incident could be explained away as a coincidence or a mistake, but the timing was too perfect, the targeting too specific. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of the text messages, copies of the bank statements, records of the complaints. I was building a case, but I wasn't sure who I could take it to. The police, a lawyer, my mom. The thought of telling my mom the truth made me sick. She was finally starting to get over the breakup, going out with friends again, smiling when she talked about her day. How could I tell her that the man she'd fallen in love with was actually a psychopath who'd been using her to get revenge on her son? But then Dave escalated. I came home from work one day to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart pounded as I pushed it open, expecting to find my place ransacked. Instead, everything looked normal. Too normal. It took me a few minutes to realize what was wrong. My gaming setup was gone. My computer, my monitors, my keyboard and mouse, even my gaming chair. All of it had been neatly removed, leaving behind only the empty desk and the cables that had connected everything together. On my kitchen counter, there was a note written in neat handwriting. Thought you might want to take a break from gaming. You seem to have trouble controlling yourself online. Dud. I called the police this time. I had to, but when they arrived, they explained that there was no sign of forced entry. The door hadn't been damaged, the locks hadn't been picked. Whoever had taken my stuff had either had a key or had been let in by someone with access to the apartment. Any idea who might have done this? The officer asked, taking notes. I started to explain about Dave, about the gaming incident, about the pattern of harassment. But as I talked, I could see the skepticism growing in the officer's eyes. A revenge plot based on a decade-old video game incident. Text messages that could have come from anyone. A man who dated my mom and then broken up with her. Look, the officer said when I finished, I can file a report, but without evidence of forced entry or witnesses, this is probably going to be classified as a civil matter. Could be someone you gave a key to. Could be the landlord. Could be someone you know who had access. After the police left, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the space where my computer used to be. Dave wasn't just taking away my stuff. He was taking away my escape, my connection to the online world where I'd felt powerful as a teenager. It was poetic justice, in a twisted way. My phone buzzed. Miss gaming yet? Don't worry, this is just the beginning. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and let Dave destroy my life piece by piece. But I also couldn't keep pretending this wasn't affecting my mom. Every time I saw her, I could tell she was still hurting from the breakup. She'd put on a brave face, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. I made a decision. I was going to confront Dave directly. I was going to find him and end this, whatever it took. It took me 3 days to track him down. I used social media, reverse phone number, lookups, and even hired a private investigator with money I couldn't really afford to spend. I found out his real name was David Kellerman, and he worked as an IT consultant for a firm downtown. He lived in a modest apartment, about 20 minutes from my mom's house. I waited outside his building one evening, sitting in my car until I saw him come home from work. He looked different out of context, smaller somehow. Without the confident demeanor he'd worn when playing my mom's boyfriend, he just looked like a regular guy in his 30s carrying a laptop bag and a takeout container. I followed him into the building, catching the door before it closed behind him. He was waiting for the elevator when he noticed me. Well, he said, turning to face me with that same cold smile. I was wondering when you'd show up. We need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I suppose we do. He gestured to the elevator as it arrived. My place or yours? Oh wait, I forgot. You don't have a computer anymore. We rode up to his floor in silence. His apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Neat, organized, and filled with high-end gaming equipment. Multiple monitors, expensive keyboards, top-of-the-line computers. My stuff was nowhere to be seen, but I hadn't really expected it to be here. Drink, he offered, walking to his kitchen. I have beer, wine, coffee, or maybe you prefer something stronger after the week you've had. I want this to stop, I said, ignoring his offer. Whatever you're trying to prove, you've made your point. I was a shitty kid. I said terrible things to you. I'm sorry, but this needs to end now. Dave poured himself a glass of wine and leaned against his kitchen counter, studying me. You're sorry. That's interesting. Are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong? Or are you sorry because it's finally catching up with you? Both, I admitted. I read the chat logs. I saw what I said to you. It was cruel and unnecessary, and I'm genuinely sorry for hurting you. Dave took a sip of his wine. You know what's funny? I used to fantasize about this moment, about you apologizing, admitting what you'd done. I thought it would feel more satisfying. Then why are you still doing this? Why are you still trying to hurt me? Dave set down his wine glass and walked over to one of his computers. The screens lit up, showing what looked like surveillance footage from various locations around the city. My apartment building, my workplace, the coffee shop where my mom met him. Because an apology doesn't undo the damage, he said, his voice getting colder. Do you know what happened to me after that night? After you and your friends spent hours tearing me apart? I shook my head, but he continued without waiting for an answer. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I kept thinking about what you'd said, about how you'd find me in real life. You gave me my first real panic attack. I ended up in the ER because I thought I was having a heart attack. He clicked through the surveillance footage showing me weeks of recordings. He'd been watching me for months, maybe years. I dropped out of high school. He continued. Couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus on anything. My parents thought I was being dramatic about some stupid game, so they didn't get me help. I spent 2 years in my room, barely leaving, barely eating. I finally got my GED when I was 20. The weight of what he was telling me settled in my stomach like a stone. I'd known my words had hurt him, but I hadn't understood the full extent of the damage. I'm sorry, I said again, but the words felt hollow. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, because to you I wasn't real. I was just a username, just a target for your entertainment. But I was a real person, dealing with real problems. And you made them so much worse. He turned away from the computers and looked at me directly. Do you know how long it took me to find you? 7 years. 7 years of searching through old gaming records, social media accounts, piecing together clues about who you really were. And when I finally found you, I discovered you'd grown up to be a reasonably successful adult, with a job and an apartment and a life, while I was still struggling with anxiety and depression, and trust issues that stemmed directly from what you did to me. But my mom, I said, desperate to find some angle that would make him stop. She didn't do anything to you. She doesn't deserve this. Dave's expression softened slightly. You're right, she doesn't. She's a wonderful woman. And if circumstances were different, I think I could have genuinely loved her. But she's collateral damage, just like I was collateral damage to your teenage fun. So what's your endgame here? What do you want from me? I want you to understand what it feels like to have your life systematically destroyed by someone who doesn't see you as a real person, he said. I want you to know what it's like to lose everything you care about, piece by piece, while feeling completely powerless to stop it. And then what? After you've destroyed my life, what happens then? Dave smiled, but for the first time it didn't look cold. It looked tired. Then maybe I'll finally be able to move on. I looked around his apartment again, taking in the expensive equipment, the surveillance setup, the evidence of years of planning and preparation. This wasn't just revenge. This was Dave's entire life. He built his whole identity around this moment, this confrontation with the kid who'd hurt him a decade ago. You need help, I said, and I meant it. This isn't healthy. This isn't normal. Normal. Dave laughed bitterly. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent years in therapy, on medication, trying to get past what happened? But every time I started to feel better, every time I thought I was moving forward, I'd remember that you were out there somewhere, living your life, completely unaware of the damage you'd caused, and it would all come flooding back. I sat down on his couch, suddenly feeling exhausted. So what do you want me to do? What would make this stop? Dave considered the question for a long moment. I want you to feel what I felt. Helpless, humiliated, alone. I want you to understand that your actions have consequences, even when you don't think they do. I already understand that, I said. I've understood it since the moment I recognized you at dinner. I've been living with the guilt and fear for weeks now. Good, Dave said. That's a start. We sat in silence for a while, both of us lost in thought. Finally, I spoke up. What if I told my mom the truth? What if I explained everything and let her decide what she wants to do? Dave's eyes sharpened. She'd be devastated. She'd blame herself for bringing me into your life. She'd probably never trust another man again. That's her choice to make, I said. She deserves to know the truth about who you are and what you've been doing. And you think that would solve everything? You think she'd forgive you for being the reason her relationship ended? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. My mom would be devastated, but she'd also be angry. Angry at me for bringing this chaos into her life, for being the reason she'd gotten hurt. I'll take that risk, I said, because this has to stop. If you really cared about her at all, you'd want it to stop too. Dave walked over to his computer again and started typing. Let me show you something, he said. The screen filled with social media profiles, bank records, employment information, and personal photos. Not just mine, but dozens of them. Names and faces I recognized as people I'd played games with years ago. You weren't my only target, he said quietly. You were just the most recent. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. How many people have you done this to? 12 so far. Some of them deserved it more than others. Some of them fought back. Some of them just disappeared entirely. Moved away, changed their names, started over somewhere else. This is insane, I whispered. You can't just destroy people's lives because of something that happened in a video game. Why not? Dave asked. You destroyed mine. I stood up abruptly, my hands shaking with anger and fear. Because we were kids. Because it was a game. Because normal people don't spend a decade planning elaborate revenge schemes. Normal people don't systematically psychologically torture strangers for entertainment either. Dave shot back. But that's what you did. That's what all of you did. I looked at the faces on the screen again. Some of them were people I'd genuinely liked. Friends I'd lost touch with over the years. The thought of Dave targeting them, hurting them, because of something we'd all done together, made me sick. I'll go to the police, I said. I'll tell them everything. The harassment, the surveillance, the break-in. I'll make them listen. With what evidence? Dave asked calmly. Anonymous text messages. Surveillance footage that I'll delete before you can get a warrant. A bank error that's already been corrected. Face it, you have nothing concrete. He was right, and we both knew it. Dave had been careful, methodical. Everything he'd done had been designed to look like coincidence. Or bad luck. Even the break-in at my apartment had been executed perfectly. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. No evidence. But you know what you do have? Dave continued. You have the power to end this. Right now. Tonight. How? Dave walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were printed screenshots of chat logs, social media posts, and forum discussions. All of them featured the same pattern. Me and my friends targeting other players, saying cruel things, ruining their gaming experiences. Public apology, he said, setting the folder on the coffee table between us. To me, to everyone else you hurt, to the entire gaming community. Take responsibility for what you did. Acknowledge the damage you caused. And maybe, I'll consider letting this go. I picked up the folder and flipped through it. Page after page of evidence, documenting years of bad behavior. Some of it was worse than I remembered. Much worse. You want me to humiliate myself publicly, I said. I want you to tell the truth publicly. Dave corrected. There's a difference. I thought about it. A public apology would be embarrassing, but it might also be a relief. I'd been carrying the guilt of my teenage behavior for years, even before Dave had shown up to remind me of it. Maybe owning up to it, acknowledging the harm I'd caused, would be worth it if it meant protecting my mom and ending this nightmare. And if I do this, you'll leave my mom alone. You'll stop harassing me. I'll consider it, Dave said, but the apology has to be genuine. No half measures. No excuses. No I was just a kid disclaimers. Full accountability. I nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. Dave smiled, and for the first time, it looked almost genuine. Good, you have 48 hours to write it, and post it. I want it on your social media, on gaming forums, anywhere people might see it, and I want you to use your real name. And then this ends. Then we'll see, Dave said, which wasn't the answer I'd been hoping for. I left his apartment feeling like I'd made a deal with the devil, but also feeling like I'd found a path forward. A public apology would be humiliating, but it might also be healing, not just for Dave, but for me too. I spent the next 2 days writing and rewriting the apology. I wanted it to be perfect, to acknowledge the harm I'd caused, without making excuses or minimizing my actions. I researched the other people Dave had shown me in his files, trying to remember specific incidents, specific things I'd said or done. When I finally posted it, I felt like I was exposing myself completely. I used my real name, included a photo, and detailed specific examples of my bad behavior. I apologized not just to Dave, but to everyone I'd hurt over the years. I acknowledged that my actions had real-world consequences, that the people I'd targeted were real humans with real feelings and real struggles. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Some people thanked me for the apology, sharing their own stories of online harassment and bullying. Others attacked me, calling me names, and saying I deserved whatever consequences I faced. Gaming forums lit up with discussions about toxic behavior and accountability. But the response that mattered most came from Dave, in a text message sent 3 hours after I posted the apology. "Well done. I'm impressed. Consider this matter closed." I wanted to feel relieved, but something about the message bothered me. It felt too easy, too clean. After years of planning and months of harassment, would Dave really give up just because of a public apology? I got my answer a week later when my mom called me, crying again. "Dave's back," she sobbed into the phone. "He showed up at my door last night with flowers and an explanation. He said he'd been dealing with some personal issues, but he's gotten help and he's ready to commit. He wants to try again." My heart sank. The apology hadn't ended anything. It had just been another phase in Dave's plan. "Mom, you can't get back together with him," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Why not? I know you didn't like him, but people change. People grow. He's been in therapy. He's dealing with his problems. Isn't that what we want from people?" I closed my eyes, knowing what I had to do. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." I told her everything. The gaming incident, the recognition at dinner, the harassment, the surveillance, the break-in. I showed her the text messages, the surveillance footage Dave had shared with me, the evidence I'd been collecting. I explained about the other victims, about Dave's years-long campaign of revenge. My mom listened in silence, her face growing paler with each detail. When I finished, she just sat there for a long moment, staring at her hands. "You're telling me that the man I love, the man who made me feel special, and wanted and happy, is actually a psychopath who's been using me to hurt you," she said finally. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." She was quiet for another long moment. Then she looked up at me, and her expression was different. Harder, more determined than I'd ever seen her. "No," she said firmly. "This is not your fault. You were a stupid teenager who said stupid things online. He's a grown man who's been systematically destroying lives for years. There's no comparison." The relief I felt was overwhelming. I'd been so afraid that she'd blame me, that she'd be angry about bringing this chaos into her life. Instead, she was angry at the right person. "What do we do now?" I asked. My mom stood up and walked to her phone. "Now we call the police, and then we call a lawyer, and then we make sure this sick bastard never hurts anyone else again." The next few months were difficult. Dave initially denied everything, claiming I was making it all up because I was jealous of his relationship with my mom. But the evidence was overwhelming. The surveillance footage, the text messages, the pattern of harassment spanning multiple victims. It all painted a clear picture of someone who had been engaged in systematic stalking and harassment for years. Other victims came forward once the story became public. People Dave had targeted, people whose lives he'd disrupted or destroyed in his quest for revenge. The police investigation revealed the full scope of his activities, and it was worse than even I had imagined. Dave was eventually charged with multiple counts of harassment, stalking, cyberstalking, and breaking and entering. He pled guilty to avoid a trial and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Part of his sentence included mandatory mental health treatment and a restraining order preventing him from contacting me, my mom, or any of his other victims. My mom struggled with the aftermath. She blamed herself for not seeing the signs, for falling for someone who had been manipulating her from the beginning. She went to therapy to work through the trauma and the betrayal. It took her a long time to trust her own judgment again. As for me, the public apology had unexpected consequences. While some people attacked me for my past behavior, others reached out to share their own stories of online harassment and bullying. I started volunteering with organizations that work to combat cyberbullying and toxic gaming culture. I used my experience as a cautionary tale, speaking at schools and gaming conventions about the real-world impact of online behavior. The whole experience changed how I think about actions and consequences. As a teenager, I'd thought the online world was separate from the real world, that what happened in games didn't matter. I learned that everything matters, that every person behind every username is a real human being with real feelings and real problems. Dave had been wrong to respond to teenage cruelty with adult revenge. His actions were inexcusable and illegal. But he hadn't been wrong about the impact of what I'd done. My words had genuinely hurt him, had contributed to real mental health problems and real-life difficulties. That was something I had to live with and learn from. The weird thing is, in some twisted way, Dave's revenge actually helped me become a better person. Not because I deserved what he put me through, but because it forced me to confront the consequences of my actions in a way I never had before. It made me more thoughtful about how I treat people, more aware of the impact my words can have. My mom eventually started dating again, but much more carefully. She took things slow, introduced me to potential partners early in the relationship, and trusted her instincts when something felt off. She deserved happiness, and I was determined to make sure she found it with someone who genuinely cared about her. The whole experience taught me that the past never really goes away. The things we do, especially the things we do to hurt others, have a way of coming back to us, sometimes in ways we'd never expect, sometimes through people we'd never suspect. Sometimes it takes years, but it always comes back. The weirdest part about the whole thing was that, in the end, I was almost grateful it happened. Not grateful for the harassment or the fear or the pain it caused my mom, but grateful for the chance to finally confront what I'd done and make amends for it. I'd been carrying the guilt of my teenage behavior for years without really understanding why. Dave's revenge, as twisted and wrong as it was, gave me the opportunity to take responsibility and try to make things right. I still think about that dinner sometimes, about the moment when Dave leaned across the table and asked if I recognized him, about how quickly my entire world shifted from normal to nightmare. It reminds me that we're all just one revelation away from having our past catch up with us. The only thing we can do is try to live in a way that we won't be ashamed of when that moment comes. Because it always comes. One way or another, the past always catches up with us. The question is whether we're ready to face it when it does.